I'm going to share my screen with you here, which is a sort of relatively short presentation about Tahiti. So first and foremost, where is Tahiti? And I'm going to have to treat you all as if you're novices to this, so I do apologize if you've been selling Tahiti for many years, but Tahiti is in the middle of the South Pacific, about an 8-hour flight southwest of Los Angeles, which is generally speaking the way that most Brits who travel to Tahiti go. They hit the west coast of the States using any number of airlines that fly into LA, and then they hop onto one of the 3 airlines that services the islands of Tahiti. I'll come to the airlines in a minute. I say the islands of Tahiti because Tahiti itself is the largest island in the Society Islands. And you can see Tahiti is the dark shape in the sort of southeast corner of this red circle. That is the island of Tahiti. When you're flying in, that is where you fly into the capital of Papeete. And it's really from there that you then continue your journey onwards. Most people will stay and holiday in the Society Islands. And that's because they are the ones that are closest to Tahiti. If you have a look at the rest of this slide, you might be able to see a blue shaded area in the background. That's Europe. So you can see the size of the islands of Tahiti. There are actually 118 islands that make up the islands of Tahiti, but most people tend to go to these islands in the Society Islands, and some of them are almost household names. We'll come on to those in a bit. Further afield, you have the Tuamotus. They are all atolls, which basically means that the islands that were in the middle of the coral reefs have now all sunk. So you've basically got these long circles of coral reef with little islets on them, and that's where most of the hotel and lodgings are. And then much further afield, you come to places such as the Marquesas, the Australs, and the Gambiers. These are really not for your first time holiday makers. It's a 3-hour flight from Tahiti to the Marquesas, for example. They are very lush, very volcanic, no lagoons at all, so very surrounded by very deep sea. So they really are more of an expedition holiday than a fly and flop. I mentioned that there are 3 airlines that service Tahiti from the west coast of North America. We have our flag carrier, Air Tahiti Nui, which flies twice daily from LA. We have United and French Bee, both of whom fly from San Francisco. So French Bee you may not have heard of. It's a low-cost airline. You could, in theory, fly low cost all the way from the UK to Tahiti using Norwegian to San Francisco and then flying onwards with French Bee. Or of course, much easier, you just fly United all the way through. When you get to Papeete itself, and after you've stayed on the island of Tahiti, which most people do, most of the incoming flights arrive in the evening. So most people will stay at least 1 night on the island of Tahiti itself. They will then, you'll hop onto one of these pond hoppers the next day and go out to whichever islands you're going to be visiting. Air Tahiti service a large number of the 118 islands. But of course, if you're going to go to a private island, you can fly on one of these little seaplanes as well. And they service a number of the much smaller islands. Even if they don't have an airport, they can still get you there. So as I said, most people who come to the islands of Tahiti stay for at least 1 night on Tahiti itself. I think Tahiti is greatly overlooked. It's the largest of all of the islands. It's got a wonderful lagoon all the way around it, some absolutely fantastic hotels, most of which are not far at all from the airport, so nice, easy access. It's, as you can see, very, very mountainous on the inside. So it's not just those water-based activities that Tahiti is known for that people go to Tahiti for. They go and they'd visit, they'd hike in the centre, go on jeep tours, cycling trips, horse riding trips, etc. There's also a market in Papeete, which has to be seen to be believed, South Pacific Island market, everything from fresh coconuts to jewelry to all of the fresh fruits and foods that they make on the islands as well. And of course, Tahiti, you may have seen in the news recently, has just been chosen as the venue for the Paris Olympics surfing competition. So it's the first time that an event in the Olympics has been quite this far away from the host city. But what you're seeing in the bottom right-hand corner of this is Tuamotu, which is a world famous surf spot. The other Society Islands, the closest neighbour to Tahiti is the island of Moorea, which is only a 45-minute ferry ride from Papeete itself. So if you don't want to have to buy another flight from Tahiti, you can just jump on the ferry. It only costs about 10 or 11 pounds to get over there. First time I took this ferry, it actually didn't take 45 minutes. It took about an hour and a quarter because we were having to go around all of the whales that were in the water. So actually it's probably the best whale spotting trip that I've ever been on, that ferry ride from Papeete across to Moorea. Moorea itself is about an hour's drive all the way around, just to give you an idea of the scale. Some absolutely fantastic hotels, as you can see here, the Intercon, Hilton, the Sofitel, etc. And next to Moorea, just a bit further away, about a 30-minute flight from Papeete, you have the islands, the twin islands of Raiatea and Taha. They're actually two islands in one lagoon. Again, they've got some absolutely fabulous hotels on them, but what they're really famous for is a point to start and end your sailing trip around the islands of Tahiti. Obviously, most people will fly from island to island, but it's becoming increasingly popular to either hire a sailing boat if you're a yachtsman skipper yourself. If not, you can actually pay to go onto a yacht that's sailing between islands. And of course, when you arrive at the island, if you don't want to spend the money on a hotel, you can actually sleep on the yacht inside the lagoons, which means that you're in shallow water and there's no waves as you are protected by the beautiful coral reefs on the outskirts of the lagoon. The other thing that Taha is famous for is diving for your own pearls in the coral garden. Pretty much all over the islands of Tahiti, you've got wonderful snorkeling and diving, but Taha is somewhere that is particularly known for its snorkeling. They're also known as the Vanilla Islands, and something that a lot of people like to go and do when they're out there is visit one of these plantations and take some home with them. The island of Tetiaroa is another island. It's famous for one thing and one thing only, and that is it's the home of the Hotel Brando. The Brando is pretty unique. It's one of the world's finest hotels, founded, as you might expect, by the Hollywood star Marlon Brando. He was actually filming back in the early 60s Mutiny on the Bounty out in the islands, and he visited Tetiaroa, thought it was the most beautiful place in the world, and then decided to make this eco resort on it. Well, it took him about 35 years to actually fulfill his dream, but now you've got this spectacular hotel on the island that is incredibly eco-friendly. For example, they are completely carbon neutral. They have seawater air conditioning, which means they pull in the very cold deep sea water, and they use that to power all of the air conditioning, and also all of the fuel that they use on the island is coconut fuel as well. But it is a pretty shishi place to go. There's only 35 villas, and you know, in the height of season, it could easily set you back in the region of $10,000 per villa per night. So it's obviously only for a specific type of clientele. Arguably the most famous island in all of the islands of Tahiti is Bora Bora. It is the home of the Overwater Bungalow. So it was the very first place on planet Earth where they built the Overwater villas. And we still have an awful lot of them. As you can see on this slide here, all of the hotels are actually on the reef on the outside, looking back in at the island of Bora Bora itself. It means that the only way to travel in between the hotels is by boat. So when you arrive at the airport, there's no taxi rank, there is literally a boat rank. And you jump on one of the boats and they will take you the short distance to whichever hotel it is that you're staying. And when you're there, there are shuttles between the hotels so that you can go and explore parts of the island from your hotel. It's also, as most of the islands of Tahiti are, very environmentally conscious, and Bora Bora is home of a world famous turtle centre where they take injured turtles and rehabilitate them before putting them out into the wild. Moving on to the Tuamotu Archipelago, slightly further away. Probably the two most famous islands here are Rangiroa and Tikehau, only because they are the closest to Papeete, both about an hour's flight away. And the Tuamotu are famous as being divers' meccas. If you love sub-aqua, they really are amazing places to go to. They have some of the largest shark populations in the world, but pretty much wherever you go into the water, you're going to see these huge manta ray, groupers, and quite amazing array of marine life, because there really aren't many other islands around it. So of course, all of the fish tend to come and congregate near the islands so they can feed. It's also famous for the Tahitian black pearls, and there are several pearl farms on the island. So it's a really fun thing to do, to go and spend an hour or so learning about how pearls are cultivated. The other thing about Rangiroa, which sets it aside, is it's home to a lagoon within the lagoon. And it's called the Blue Lagoon. It is a day trip from any of the hotels on Rangiroa itself. You get taken over in a small boat. They catch fish on the way over for your lunch. When they get to one of the islands that surrounds the Blue Lagoon, they will make a little fire. They'll cook the fish that they've caught, and you just spend the island sitting around in the sea with all of your new friends, which you can see in the right-hand picture there. Now, for any of you who are afraid of sharks, I can assure you these are completely harmless. When I went to the Blue Lagoon, when we first got there, no one would go into the water because there were about 200 of these guys and girls hanging around. But within about an hour of being on the island, everyone was sitting in the water, trying to stroke them as they came past when they realized they were entirely harmless. So it really is a beautiful place to go and see that things that otherwise you might otherwise have thought were terrifying sea creatures actually can be totally harmless and love humans. The Marquesas, as I said, are about a 3-hour journey, 3-hour flight from Papeete itself. They are about as far as you can go from Papeete before you hit the wide ocean, and there is nothing really between the Marquesas and South America. So they kind of are the end of the earth, if you like. They're tricky to get to. Also, when you are there really aren't very many hotels. But if you've got clients who really have traveled everywhere and are looking for somewhere entirely different and really give them bragging rights at their next dinner party, then visiting the Marquesas as part of a trip to the islands of Tahiti really is pretty special. There are lots and lots of archaeological sites, these tikis that you can see, which are the stone statues, similar to the ones that you get on places like Easter Island, botanical gardens, and of course, there will be no other tourists there, which is, if you are looking to fully immerse yourself in the Tahitian culture, then they're an awesome place to visit. So what do you do when you're actually on all of the islands? Well, as I said, most people will go just to fly and flop, sit in their overwater bungalow, soak up the sunshine, enjoy the amazing French cuisine. But if you do get bored of that, then there's plenty to do. Obviously, you've got all of the things to do in the sea, the snorkeling and so on, but also there are wonderful inland tours, as I mentioned before. As you can see, some of the islands go up to over 2,000 meters, and given the size of them, you can imagine how jagged and just how steep some of these mountains are. Vanilla plantations and spa and wellness tend to be the most popular things to do, obviously along with whale watching, fishing, snorkeling, etc. Now, whale season is at the back of the year and across Christmas. So it's really during what the Tahitians call their rainy season. So it's kind of like from November, December through to about February. It sounds, you know, like, why would you go all the way if it's going to rain? But because they're tropical islands, really it only rains for a very short time every day. The rainy season is actually warmer than the dry season. Temperatures across the islands of Tahiti don't range much each year. The average temperature throughout the year is about 27 degrees centigrade. In the dry season, the temperatures are about 25 to 30 degrees every day. And in the rainy season, they're about 30 to 35 degrees every day. So as you can see, very, very pleasant. There's no cold weather there at all. And because it's so much more popular in the dry season, I would actually always suggest to Brits to go during the rainy season, because of course it's in the middle of our winter, which means it's lovely to get away. There really isn't much rain other than these short, sharp, warm downfalls. And as I said, it's whale watching season, which means you're more likely to see these fellows than at any other time of the year. Other than that, because the islands are surrounded by ocean and these beautiful, safe lagoons for the most part, water activities are very, very popular, whether it be jet skiing, paddle boarding, canoeing, etc. So where do people stay in Tahiti? Well, the one thing that we always hear leveled at Tahiti is the cost of the accommodation. The beauty of Tahiti is that they stopped building there a long time ago. Everything is highly protected. So it's unlike places like the Maldives, where they will stick a new hotel on every single grain of sand. We can't build anymore. Obviously, the hotels are continually being refreshed and refurbished, but it does mean that when you pay the money to go there, you do feel like it's exclusive. You're not looking over other hotels stretching all the way down the coast, for example. It does mean, however, especially in high season when availability is difficult, the costs can go up. It's another reason to go in the rainy season when it's less popular to travel there. But it does mean if you want to go and stay in one of the 5-star overwater bungalows in Bora Bora, for example, like the ones in the picture here at the Conrad, it can be quite expensive. So thankfully, there's a whole variety of accommodations throughout the islands that you can go and stay in. Not just your overwater bungalows, but we also have garden bungalows and beach bungalows, and these Tahitian guest houses. There are about 400 of these dotted throughout the islands. They range anything from 2 rooms to 25 rooms. Some of them can be very, very basic B&Bs where you eat with the family. Some are much, much more developed, and they could be a dozen bungalows, 4-star, 5-star bungalows on the back of a beach, but just happen to be owned and family run. There are cruises that visit the islands of Tahiti. A great thing is that we don't get any of the big boats. So you don't get any of the sort of 6,000 people carnivals decanting all of their people into the market to buy fridge magnets in an afternoon. And the reason is because they can't get close to the islands because of the lagoons. But there are 3 boats that go around the islands themselves. 2 of them pictured here, the Paul Gauguin and the Aranui 5. There's also one called Wind Spirit as well. But as you can see, they're smaller boats. They're only about 80 rooms on each. And they travel around the islands. They have various different itineraries ranging from 1 week to 2 weeks throughout the year. And I particularly like Aranui 5 because it is half cargo boat and half cruise ship. So this boat goes out to the Marquesas, and as it unloads all the provisions, you as a guest jump off the boat, go and explore the island, go and do your horseback riding or whatever else it is you wanted to do in the Marquesas, and then jump back on before sailing to the next island. So it's a great way to go and see those islands that perhaps don't have hotels and guest houses on. As I mentioned before, we are in French Polynesia, so the food is pretty awesome. This here is the national dish. It's called poisson cru, which means raw fish. Essentially, it's fish which is marinated in coconut milk and lime juice, and is absolutely fantastic, very refreshing, and available pretty much throughout the islands. But don't worry if you don't like fish. They get lots of their supplies from New Zealand, so the beef and all of the other multicultural foods that you would expect in five-star resorts are, of course, available. I mentioned the weather before, the dry season and the rainy season. I'd like to say that we get about half of the rainfall that Hawaii does. So if you think how popular Hawaii can be, it's going to be drier than that, which is great. But you can go pretty much any year round. My final comments, I suppose, would be that Tahiti is not for everyone. It is quite a long way away. You know, when you take the flight to the west coast of the States and then on to Papeete itself, you're probably looking at around a 22-hour flight in total, which is why a lot of people will stop on the west coast of the States for a few days to acclimatize, if you like, stay in LA or San Francisco before flying on to Tahiti. It's also very popular as part of a round the world trip as well. But pretty much whenever you go, the weather is very pleasant. But because of the cost of getting there with the flights and also the cost of the accommodations, you really are looking to pitch it to your top 5% of clients. It's not money, no object, but this really is a bucket list destination. And we do find a lot of people think they want to go to the islands of Tahiti, but when they find out exactly how much it costs, they end up, unfortunately, going somewhere else. So you can save yourself some time and effort and really only try and pitch it to your top selling or top spending clients. I think that's it. If you've got any questions at all, by all means, email
Jim, we've got a couple in the chat box here. I just want
to have you. Great, thanks, Adam.
Just a quick one. What is the cost of living? Haley's asked, what's the cost of living like for eating out, etc.?
Well, it does depend on where you are. So, for example, if you are in Papeete, which is, a town of 60,000 people, you can pop into the market, go and get street food. It's going to cost you pennies. If you're staying in the Four Seasons Bora Bora and you want to go and have a burger, it's going to cost you 20 quid, but then it would do pretty much anywhere. So there is a real spread of costs. The one thing I would say that you need to advise your clients is, depending on where they stay, obviously the hotels like you to stay there. So, and they are reluctant to let you go off and have dinner in another hotel, for example. So in that respect, it's very much like a lot of places in, say, the Maldives, who, once they've got you, they want to keep you. So what they might do is charge you more for the shuttles which go over at dinner time, so that it makes it more cost effective for you to stay in resort and eat in their hotels. But essentially, booze is pretty expensive, I'll say now, because obviously all of the wine has to be shipped in. But the food is pretty reasonable. There's something pretty much for everyone, and most of the hotels will have their fine dining restaurants, but also they'll have snack bars as well. And of course, you can always go to the main island to the shop and buy yourself provisions if that's what you want to do.
Great. And then the next one, actually, sorry, it wasn't a question, it was just from Lisa to say she got some new inquiries yesterday, and it seemed like yesterday was as near to normal as it can get. So okay, well, that's good. That's good news for all of us. Well, look, I just wanted to say thank you very much indeed. If you've got any questions about the islands of Tahiti, please do either contact myself, jim@blackdiamond.co.uk, or Adam, which is adam@blackdiamond.co.uk, and we'll be sure to come back to you. And I just sincerely hope that not only do you start to see more and more people inquiring and bookings coming through, but hopefully that some of them are Tahitian as well. So thanks very much indeed for your time.